Right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Baker, and I am the district behaviorist here in Benicia Unified. This is our weekly quick tips session for parents and care providers in Benicia. And it looks like we have, this is a record. We have 3 people joining us so far. I'm just going to go ahead and mute you all since we are recording today. But please jump in if you have any questions or you want to stop. Don't just post in the chat because I tend not to see it, but feel free to jump in if you have any questions, and we're going to go ahead and get going. So today we're going to be talking about setting limits and avoiding power struggles. But I always start with this quote. Working, parenting, and teaching are 3 different jobs that cannot be done at the same time. It's not hard because you are doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. Do the best you can. And when you have to pick, because at some point you will, choose connection. And Dr. Emily W. King said this last spring. All right. So acknowledgements for today, I always list where I got my material. So as usual, the Midwest Center for PBIS. I pulled from CPI's approach to setting limits. This is the Crisis Prevention Institute, and they do a lot of work on nonviolent crisis intervention. The Placer County Office of Education, and then a document that's called How to Use Positive Discipline to Stop Power Struggles and Raise Empowered, Capable Kids. And we just had someone else join us. So we actually have 5 people here today, which is really great. Everybody else is watching probably on YouTube, but this is a record. So this is exciting. Maybe we'll even have some discussion today. So the expectations for this training, this is being recorded for those of you that haven't been here before. So if you have concerns about confidentiality, you can rename yourself, you can remove your picture if you don't want to be seen. If you have a question, I ask that you actually just unmute and interrupt me, because I don't necessarily see the chat when I have the PowerPoint up and running. And what I always say too is the part about being responsible, everything that I talk about does have an evidence base, meaning that it's been studied, it works for a lot of kids and teens and parents, but not every strategy works for every person. So if there's something that doesn't resonate, just come back next week. Hopefully at some point you'll hear something that you connect with. All right, so last week we did part 1, and we talked about the philosophy of positive discipline. And then we also talked about a very specific strategy about how to correct behavior, which I'll review very briefly. And then today what we're going to do for our part 2 is talk about some common traps that parents fall into, and we're going to talk about effective ways to set limits. So I showed this last week as well. Discipline is helping a child solve a problem. Punishment is making a child suffer for having a problem. To raise problem solvers, we focus on solutions, not retribution. And this is another one, again, from last week. If a child does not know how to read, we teach. If a child does not know how to swim, we teach. If a child does not know how to multiply, we teach. If a child does not know how to drive, we teach. If a child does not know how to behave, we teach, or we punish, or we do something else. And Herner asks, why can't we finish the last sentence as automatically as we do the others? So just a quick review from last week, positive discipline. Positive discipline means showing respect. It means catching your kids when they're getting it right. It reminds them that you love them while you're teaching them right from wrong. Positive discipline is more effective in the long term because it focuses on teaching children how to do things the right way, where traditional punishment methods don't teach kids to think about why certain behaviors are wrong or how their actions impact other people. So positive discipline, by asking kids to put themselves in other people's shoes and to problem solve, this leads to perspective taking and consideration of others and feelings of accountability and responsibility, where traditional punishment, you don't get results like that. Does this mean that there are no consequences ever? I always reiterate that no, it does not mean that there are not consequences for poor choices or poor behavior. And setting limits, which we'll be talking about today, is a critical part of positive discipline. It's just not all of it. So one more quick review from last week. We talked specifically about what do you do in the moment to correct behavior. And the rule of thumb is to be brief and concise, to point out the problem behavior through specific feedback and redirection. And we always refer back to our parenting matrix here. If you want more information about that, you can look at our Parent Webpage. We clarify and reteach our expectations. We remember to approach it like we were teaching math. The same calm instructional approach that we would use if our kid made a mistake on a math problem. That's the same kind of approach. Doesn't mean you can't be firm, but we don't use emotion and we don't get angry. We pair behavior-specific praise when and if your children turns it around and displays the appropriate behavior. So that's in the moment how you deliver a behavior correction, and we'll come back to that later because it's also a part of setting limits. So now into some parenting traps. So what are some common ways that we all get trapped? Whether you're a parent at home or a staff person at school, we want some behavior to stop. It's annoying, it's loud, it's inappropriate. For whatever reason, we want something to stop. But the problem is often our natural instincts and many of the common ways that we respond to problem behaviors get us trapped. And one way, one thing that's called is the cycle of coercion. And we call it like this back and forth or this tug of war where we're trying to control or stop a behavior. And then the kids or the teens push back. And so we come down harder and they push back more, and it kind of spirals from there. So in the cycle of coercion, it's this back and forth that actually makes it worse than when we started. We, inadvertently, we can escalate a situation. It can create bigger problems instead of correcting and moving on. And some kids actually look for that power struggle, that tug of war, that back and forth. And what we always like to remind everybody is when those kids are looking for that back and forth, do not pick up the rope. You cannot, this is one of my favorite pictures of like the little girl holding the rope and the person just standing there. You cannot have a tug of war if one person refuses to engage. All right, so what this looks like in specific terms. A common trap that we use is punishment. If you do or don't do that, I will yell, spank your bottom, call your dad, call your mom, take away this, take away that. Another trap, we call it negative reinforcement, which is I'm going to keep on you until you do it. But then I'll end up probably nagging you again in 10 minutes or tomorrow. Questioning, why? Why did you do that? What are you doing? Arguing, you have to do it right now. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Threats, if you do or don't do something, I will take away, or do you want to lose this privilege? This one, I've done this when I used to run social groups. Despair, pleading, or hopelessness. I'm just trying to get through this lesson. Please do this. We just need this one more thing, and then we can do this, or we can have dinner. Or this is another common one, logic and lecture, talking for long periods after the problem about what happened, why did you do it, and why it was wrong. And it's a big time waster, primarily because it doesn't stop the behavior from happening in the future. So what can we do instead to avoid these traps? This is where we get into setting limits. So there are 5 steps. I'm going to go over them briefly, and then we're going to talk about each one a little more. So limits are a powerful tool, one of the most powerful tools that parents have for teaching appropriate behavior. But the purpose is not to exert authority or to show them who's boss. It's to provide your child or your teenager with guidance, respect, and a feeling of security. And again, that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for choosing poorly or behaving poorly. So to set limits effectively, the 5 things to remember are to explain, and I put briefly, which behavior is inappropriate. 2, to explain briefly why the behavior is inappropriate. To give reasonable choices with consequences. To allow time and space for them to make their decision. And then to be prepared to enforce your consequences. So let's talk about each one of those a little bit more. Step 1, explain which behavior is inappropriate. So stop that isn't sufficient. Again, when we're delivering a behavior correction, we want to tell our kids what we do want instead of just telling them what we don't want. And especially for some kids, putting the focus on what they shouldn't do just makes them want to do it more. Not all kids are like that, but I've seen a lot that are. So you point out the problem behavior through specific feedback, and you redirect to the appropriate behavior. Your voice is too loud, please lower your voice. Please speak more quietly. So you always tell them, you can label what you don't want, but you always tell them what you do want. Don't assume that they know. The second step, don't assume your child knows why the behavior is unacceptable. And again, tell them why, but briefly. Is the behavior disrespectful? Is it disturbing others? Is it unsafe? Is it impolite? And again, I go back to referring to your family matrix can really help keep you on point with communicating the why. The family matrix is basically 3 to 5 family values that are then defined about what it means. And a lot of people choose things like be safe, be respectful, be responsible. So again, if you don't know what the family matrix is, I encourage you to check this out. It's a very handy thing to have done and have posted, because in the moment, you can refer to it when correcting behavior and explaining why something is inappropriate. Step 3, offering choices with consequences. And we say reasonable choices with consequences. This is what we do instead of ultimatums, which is do this or else. We tell the child or the teenager what their choices are, and typically it's 2 choices. I wouldn't go beyond 3, but typically it's limited choice, it's 2. Tell them what each of the choices are and the consequences of each choice, or what will happen after as a result. Sometimes if-then statements can be very helpful here. So for example, if you finish your work now, you'll have time for Xbox after dinner. If you choose not to finish your work now, you can finish it after dinner instead of playing. Think about what you want to do. I'll be back in 5 or something like that. So we're using those if-then. So we're saying, if you make a good choice, this good thing happens. If you make this other choice, this not so good thing happens. But you think about it and you decide. And we do this because instead of saying, you have to do your work now, technically they don't have to. We can't physically force them to do their work. And when we give ultimatums, this often leads to pushback because it feels like being controlled and people don't want to feel forced to do something. So where we come in as the adult and as the parent is we tell them the 2 different choices and what's going to happen afterwards. So we're admitting that we're not going to force them to do it. We're going to have them think about it and choose, but we will very much decide what the consequences of both those choices are. So step 4, allow time. This is a big one. Because usually if we're having to set a limit, we're probably just not sitting around with a lot of time on our hands. We're probably needing to keep things moving. There's a reason they need to be doing what you're trying to get them to do. However, pushing harder often just gets them to push back. And sometimes just giving a couple of minutes can be golden to bring down the power struggle and to give them an opportunity to actually think about what they want to do instead of just reacting and pushing back because they're upset or something. So give them a couple of minutes to make their decision. Give them physical space if needed. And remember that if they're upset, they're probably not thinking that clearly, and they may even need a little bit longer to think through what you've told them. So the fifth step, be prepared to enforce your consequences. Limit setting will not work and will be totally meaningless if you don't consistently enforce the consequences that you've set. So you always need to make sure that you're setting consequences that are reasonable and fair and that they're enforceable. Don't threaten something that you can't follow through on, like taking away like an outing that it's not really a choice, they stay home, so you know they're going to go with you anyway. Don't threaten to take that away, because then if they make the choice and they go anyway, it will only undermine your authority in the future. So a couple of verbal limit setting examples. I don't remember where I got these. I got them at a conference or something, but these are verbal patterns that you can read, pick a couple that really resonate with you and memorize these to go back to when things are tough. Because when we're frustrated and emotional with our kids, it's hard to think clearly and to respond rather than react. So these are just some that can be very effective when you're feeling like you want to punish or threaten or yell or give an ultimatum. These can be much more effective. You can blank when you blank. You're welcome to join us when you blank. Do you want to blank now or in 5 minutes? That's one of my favorites, because we're not giving them the choice whether they want to do it or not. It's just the choice. Are you going to do it now or a little bit later? It's amazing that it works as often as it does. When and then, that's a good one, because it's like, you know, when your homework's done, then you can go outside and play, that kind of thing. We call it grandma's rule. Like, after you eat your peas, then you can have dessert. We always want them to know what good thing will happen when they get done, what they need to get done. We can blank as soon as you blank. I'll be able to listen to you as soon as your voice is as calm as mine. This is instead of talking over, because if we meet them here, they'll go here. So I'll be able to listen as soon as your voice is as calm as mine. Would you like to blank or blank? Limited choices are always good. I'll be glad to discuss this when you finish your homework or something like that. You can either do blank or blank. It's your decision. Let me know when you're ready. And if this, then this. Think about what you want to do. Okay, so again, some people have personal favorites. I love if then, and it's your decision. Let me know what you decide. Those are two of my favorites. So pick out your favorites, memorize these, and pull them out when you need them. So a couple of reminders. Again, limits are not ultimatums. Those are not the same thing. The purpose of limits is to teach, not to punish. Limits are less about talking and more about active listening, because when we're listening to, if we hear all the noise about why they're upset, active listening can get us more in touch with what exactly the problem is and what exactly it is that they're needing, what they want or what they don't want. And it can also help us figure out what's important to them, which we can then use when we're setting our limits. If we know it's really about wanting to have enough time to socialize, then we're going to use that when we set a limit about needing to get your homework done. You know, when you get your homework done, you'll have enough time to hang out with your friends. You want to offer things that have meaning to them, and active listening enables us to do that. And then effective responses to problem behavior are always calm, consistent, brief, immediate, and respectful. So I showed this last week, the golden rule, keep your cool. Easier said than done, but limit setting is the most effective when we are calm and in control of ourselves and our voice. And there's a link on the Parent Webpage. Dr. Dan Siegel, he got his medical degree from Harvard and did some education at UCLA, and he's trained in pediatrics and child, adolescent, and adult psychiatry. So he kind of knows his stuff, but he does a lot of talking about how do I remember what to do in the heat of the moment? Because in the moment we lose our temper, and then after we're calm, we're like, oh, that's not how I wanted to respond. I should have done this. I should have said this. So he talks about this simple strategy called Name It to Tame It. And there's, I think we're actually going to we're going to watch the video in a couple minutes. So I'm going to wrap this up on him. But it's basically a simple little strategy that can help put your emotional brain on hold and access your thinking brain. Basically, he calls it getting your prefrontal cortex back online by labeling your emotions. So we'll hear more from him in a minute. But other tips for keeping your cool, taking a breath, counting to 10. And again, I know if you're rolling your eyes, that's okay. When people suggest these to me, I probably do the same thing. But if we can remember to do it, it really does work. Sometimes walking away and taking a breath, thinking about what I'm going to say and come back, and then you say it, enables me to say something concisely and without emotion. And again, I go back to the family matrix here. Having your family values and expectations prioritized and posted can help us refer to it in the moment. It's a good prompt for us adults. All right, so now before we do Name It to Tame It, we're going to actually watch one other one first. So this is a video. This is Rita Pearson, and she was an educator for many years. She's passed away a few years ago. It's a real loss, but this is a dated video. And it's a teacher-student relationship, but I thought it was a really good example. It's about 6 minutes long. It's a really good example of how not to have a limit setting conversation and how to have a productive limit setting conversation. So even though it's teacher-student, I think you can apply it as a parent. So again, it's about 6 minutes, a little on the long side, but it's a good one.
During class, many times teachers feel the need to confront students, especially in situations like testing or class assignments when absolute scrutiny is required. The scene with Ty and I will include the fact that I've caught him cheating on a test and how we get into a confrontation with each other. In confrontational situations with a student, it is almost impossible for the teacher to win, either to win the students over to her side or to get the student to see his or her side. So that is what we're going to demonstrate right now. Excuse me, Mr. Brown. I believe I told you when we started the test that I wanted to see no, look at me when I'm talking to you, that I wanted to see no cell phones. Is that a cell phone?
What did it look like?
Oh, no, you are not going to talk back to me. I said no cell phones. You got that cell phone out. And are you texting on that cell phone? Are those answers to my exam on your cell phone?
Yeah.
That's all you have to say?
Well, last time I checked, I only had one mother, so excuse me.
I'm glad I'm not your mother. As a matter of fact, your mother ought to be very upset with you right now. Do you know that you need my class to get out of this high school?
I don't care if I need your class or not.
Listen, young man, do you know I am your teacher? You are the student. I am the teacher. You seem to forget that every day, not just on this test. As a matter of fact, I think I caught you cheating on the last test, didn't I?
Whatever, Miss Rita.
Look, don't misread me. My name is Mrs. Pearson. You have that thing too about calling me by my first name. That's gonna stop too, mister. You know what? Just get out. Just get out of my classroom and you're failing this test. Do you have that? Do you have it?
Whatever.
That situation did not warrant a win on either side. He fails the test, and I don't have any more respect from this student than I had when we started. We're going to try it this time with me trying a different approach one where we end up with a win-win situation, rather than being on opposing sides. Mr. Brown, you have a cell phone in my class, and this is not the first time I've asked you not to have a cell phone. And I believe you're texting answers. You're cheating. And I can't tell you how disappointed I am. What do you have to say?
I'm sorry.
Is that gonna get it?
Won't happen again.
Listen, this is an honors English course. You know that. I believe you have applications into some very good schools, and you're cheating, and cheating cannot be tolerated. Now, here are your options, Mr. Brown. You can either take the F on this exam, because that's exactly what you're going to receive, or you can choose to take the exam over, and this one will be much more difficult than the one you're taking now. So what's your choice here? Hurry up, I don't have all day. I'm so disappointed. I can't tell you how hurt I am.
This test is hard.
I realize that. I realize it's some very difficult information, which is why I had study sessions scheduled for the last 2 weeks. Mr. Brown, you came to one. Now, first of all, tell me, are you or are you not prepared to take responsibility for your own actions?
I am.
Which means that you're going to have to take charge of your own success. You need to show up for the study sessions, and you need to be prepared, and you wouldn't have to cheat on my test. So what's your decision? An F on this exam is an automatic, but I'll give you another exam. But this one is going to be twice as difficult, and you're going to take a grade cut. What's your choice?
I would like to retake the test, please.
You may. The respect between us, Mr. Brown, has to improve. I see your potential as a student. I see you have potential to go on to do whatever you want to do, but I will not keep having these confrontations with you about your cheating. We got to get a handle on this. If you need me, I'm here for morning and afternoon sessions, and whatever you need to do, I'm here for you, but I will not allow you to be a cheater, and I will not allow integrity to be broached on my exam. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
I think so. Thank you, Mr. Brown. In that situation, the student has the option of either failing the course. Failing the exam was not negotiable, but he was going to have to take a grade cut on the next one. Sometimes we back kids into corners and they have no way out. In this one, he takes the grade cut, he gets the F on the exam, but I allow him to redeem himself by taking the exam again. That in some situations is not acceptable, but what is first and foremost is that the student be treated with dignity, even in spite of the fact that he's had a serious breach of conduct here. Mr. Brown, how did you feel when I screamed at you?
I felt like I didn't have any other choice but to come back at you.
Okay.
So you coming off strong, it makes me feel like I have to do the same towards you.
And I tried to make you feel bad. I told you that you hurt my feelings by cheating on my test. How did that impact you?
It made me feel bad. It really made me feel bad.
Because I think you thought I made you feel bad.
Yeah.
Exactly. If we make each other feel bad, then that means there's a connection there. There's a relationship. If you care about me and you perceive that I care about you, then there's usually a way that we can settle our difference. But you did have to pay. The consequence is the same. You do get a consequence because you cheated, but the outcome is totally different when we don't get into a showdown situation.
All right. So hopefully you got out of that what I get out of that every time I watch it. She's incredible, but it's a really good job. And again, I know it's a student-teacher relationship, but it's all the points of everything that we just talked about staying calm and in control of ourselves and being firm and giving choices with consequences, and that there are consequences for bad behavior, but separating the kid from the behavior, giving them a chance to redeem themselves, listening more than talking when she knows that college is important to him. So she used that in her discussion, and this is why it's important. I know you want to go to college and do A, B, and C. So it's just a very good example of how you can set limits, but in a way that's calm, respectful, and in a teaching manner. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Let's see it in here. All right, so this is Dan Siegel, and this is just one of his videos, but this is where he explains Name It to Tame It, which is something that we can use to help us regain control and respond in the ways that we just talked about, how we can set a limit calmly. We can't do that if we're not calm. So this is the brain science basics and the two simple steps to calm a child who's experiencing intense emotion. So this is Dan Siegel.
There are studies that everybody should know about that I summarize with the phrase, name it to tame it. So if you're really agitated, you're frightened of being rejected again, or you're really upset with what happened, or you're angry or whatever. In Maria's right brain, I can tell you this, in addition to right and left, there's, now please excuse these incredibly simplistic statements, but there's an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. Now I'm fine with that for this parenting book, but believe me, my son, my other foot is in science, and the scientists would see that and go, what? But the fact is, there's a cortical rim where a lot of this higher stuff goes on, and there's everything below the cortex. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your fingers, put your hands over the top, give this a try. This would be in my brain like this, see? And so this would be the cortex where you do all your thinking and planning and all that kind of stuff. If you lift up your cortex, you have everything below the cortex, which we call the downstairs brain. That's reasonable. Downstairs is just a substitute for the word subcortical, which freaks parents out. So downstairs. And it's the upstairs brain is the cortex. Okay, so you lift up your upstairs brain, you go to your downstairs brain, that's the subcortex. It's the limbic area, and it's the brainstem. These are very ancient circuits responsible for things like emotion and motivation and fight, flight, freeze reaction, and your arousal states with your awake or sleep, stuff like that. So what happens at that moment is, if we did a scan on your brain, we would say that your right amygdala, your limbic area, your downstairs brain, the downstairs brain would be super active. Scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And studies show that if you have this kind of presence and of mind, I can get Maria's left brain to name feeling from the downstairs brain. And you can show that she will squirt soothing neurotransmitters down to her right limbic area, right downstairs brain, and calm it down. Okay, so we quickly summarized that entire set of studies with Name It to Tame It. And so that's all parents need to know. The book, we didn't put any of this stuff, but everything is backed up by science, believe me.
So what does that look like? I come to you and I have a problem.
So here's what it looks like. So let's say you're agitated about being rejected by your friend. So I give you the hug. All I'm doing at that moment, not naming anything. You don't jump to that. First, it's connect, and then redirect. So that's we have these strategies: connect and redirect. So the idea is, first I connect with my right hemisphere. That helps soothe your whole system, but you're still nervous about going back to school. So then I say, well, let's talk about it. And you say, well, this happened, and she was there, and she was going to go to the party, but she didn't want to go, and then they turned away from me. They wouldn't have lunch with me. And I said, sounds like you're really feeling a big feeling of fear that when you go to school tomorrow, no one's going to want to have lunch with you. So we're naming fear.
And I thought I was angry.
And maybe you were angry too.
But it helps to have.
Right, but you have to actually name the accurate emotion.
Yeah, I hear that.
Right? Because we could say, well, you're feeling excited to go for popsicles, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just naming anything.
And when you name it, it registers as true. That's what I'm getting at. Is sometimes we think we're angry, but in fact we're sad or we're fearful. So by you saying fear, it might in fact.
That would calm your downstairs brain. Yeah. Right. So that at that moment, then we're using first connecting with the right hemisphere helps the system get stabilized. You don't feel alone. The next step is to name it to tame it. So I'm going to now help you with my left brain, because I'm going to use both my hemispheres together and go, gosh, I wonder what my daughter's really feeling here. And I'm not going to tell you what you're feeling, but I would say something like, I wonder if you're feeling scared. And then in Maria's brain, the whole system calms down.
All right. So that was actually a different clip. I forgot I put that clip in. So that was a clip where he's talking about how to use Name It to Tame It to help de-escalate. your kid if they're upset. And you basically use your upstairs brain to label what's going on in their downstairs brain as a way to kind of help bring them out of it and label what's going on. There's also an article, and this is on the Parent Webpage. This is the video I was thinking of, where the article in the Huffington Post is called How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids. And he talks about how to use Name It to Tame It to calm ourselves so we can remain in control. So it's something that we can use with our kids, but it's also something we can use from on ourselves. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up. We got a couple minutes left. So in summary, positive discipline, it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for poor behavior, but positive discipline in general is a teaching approach. It involves being consistent, calm, brief, picking our battles, catching our kids being good, and reminding them that we still love them, even if they behave badly. Limits are a powerful tool for teaching appropriate behavior, and we need to remember that it's not the same as an ultimatum. The purpose of a limit is not to show the kid who's boss, but to provide your child with guidance, respect, and a feeling of security. So setting limits is part of positive discipline. It's about active listening than talking. And again, the intention is to teach, not to punish. And I put these 5 in here again, because we always have to remember when we are responding to effectively to problem behavior, calm, consistent, brief, immediate, and respectful. All right. So I always show this at the end. This is the Parent Webpage. You can email me at jenbaker@venetiaunified.org if you don't have the link to this. But the handouts from all of our quick tip sessions are on there, and I'm constantly adding new things and updating. So I've recently put some new things about setting limits and preventing escalating behaviors. Along with, I mentioned last week, I got some feedback from some parents that it was more elementary focused. So I have put additional secondary resources on there. And there's a lot more stuff that I put on in the last couple of weeks about stress, anxiety, and Zoom fatigue. So that is all at your disposal. The way that it works is it's basically a living, breathing web page. You can scroll right to left or up and down. It's organized in columns like a newspaper. And there's videos and links and handouts and things like that. We also have office hours, which is something that I'm offering for any parent or caregiver in Benicia. It's a free resource. You can find the flyer on this webpage in the first column under Parent Resources in Benicia. And basically you fill out a little form and you can meet with me for 30 minutes if you want more information about how to use one of these strategies with your own children, or if you just kind of want to talk about what's going on and for me to give you some direction or some resources, that is an option. And for our viewers here live, you can watch this. If you just thought it was the greatest thing ever and you want to watch it again and again, you can access it on YouTube. And if you're already watching this on YouTube, then you know it's on YouTube. So I think that's it for now. We have a couple of minutes. People tend to be really quiet, but I do want to open it up since we have a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions or feedback or anything they want to share with me and our audience at home? All right, the crowd is silent. So hopefully that means I did a really good job and answered all your questions. And thanks for joining us today. And I hope to see you guys next week. And I'm gonna